So as you can see, all the games have their own flaws and logical failings, so we can't just accuse Case 3. As a matter of fact, in Dual Destiny, when you make a video, you give people power. You give them the power to do whatever they want with your video. You give them the power to praise it. You give them the power to critique it. And you give them the power to disregard everything positive they say. Interestingly, the same thing applies for the things you create. Video games, Ace Attorney, Apollo Justice. So I know what you guys are thinking. What exactly happened to the review? The review was hell. I finished the script 7 months ago, and I looked back on it and decided it was bad and wanted to redo it. Soon after, while rescripting, I decided the video was too long. I found myself unmotivated, and here we are. So here's what I've decided to do. I've decided to do discussion videos based on each and every one of the commonly stated problems of Apollo Justice. In my opinion, Apollo Justice is actually a really good game, and I honestly think it's arguably the second best main series game in the series. Better than the first game, better than Justice for All, and even better than Dual Destiny. Now, that's a bold statement, and before you hit the dislike button or write an angry comment insulting me for thinking in such a way, I would like to inform people of something. This is my opinion, and I'm in no way telling you to share my opinion. Like, I'm not getting a gun, pointing it to your head and forcing you to think what I think. Cause it's like people will literally try and kill you for having a positive or negative opinion on something. And then the police will come and they'll be like, in my defense, he said something bad about Dual Destinies. And then the cop is all like, you did the right thing, you're free to go. And that doesn't just apply to my opinion, that applies to several opinions in the Ace Attorney community. And I've gone on record stating that I will never insult someone for having their opinion, as long as the argument isn't flawed. And flawed doesn't mean I have to agree with it or be okay with it. Flawed means the basis behind the argument simply not being true. And we're going to explore those sorts of arguments today. So first of all, I should probably start by saying this. Finding one logical failing in a game doesn't make a game automatically terrible. While you may not, some people are legitimately using this as a means to justify hating the entire game. So I'll try to explain the argument against this game as clearly as possible. Large majorities of this fanbase have accused Apollo Justice of being a poorly written game, for containing plot holes and flawed logic. My intention with this video is to explain these logical failings and disprove this belief entirely. So let's start with case 3. The biggest gripe with this case commonly seems to be that Machi, a small boy, is accused of shooting the victim and suffering no injuries whatsoever. People state that this is something the game is completely oblivious to, therefore treats the player like an idiot. So the first thing we need here is context, because this is something that requires context in order to understand. Something many people seem to have not caught up on or just not noticed was the purpose of Apollo Justice. The game focuses fundamentally on 3 things: Phoenix's disbarment, Trucy's family, and the broken legal system. Those are the 3 key things this game focuses on. And how does the game explore the concept of a broken legal system? It does it through creating criminals who are using the broken legal system to their advantage. This is something shown not only through Apollo Justice, but also the Phoenix Wright trilogy. Famous examples include Furio Tigre, Manfred von Karma, Dahlia Hawthorne, and in this game's case, Christoph Gavin and Darien. This isn't something implied either, it's shown several times throughout the game. It's shown through Phoenix being set up in his final trial and the helplessness of his situation. It's shown through Phoenix being forced into a situation in case 1 where he himself had to go against his moral principles and falsify evidence in order to ensure Christoph says something he shouldn't, and ultimately leading to Apollo being able to find the truth. One of the themes for the game is perceiving the truth, and because of the dire situation of the legal system, it's what you're forced to do. I'm sorry to harp on Dual Destinies again, but the legal system really didn't reach its dark age in that game, or when Phoenix lost his badge. Even in Ace Attorney's original conception, it was bad. The legal system in Ace Attorney is based on the terrible legal system in Japan. The entire fate of your client is in the hands of the judge, a forgetful old man who is literally known for being easily swayed by witnesses or prosecutors. Apollo Justice establishes that the issue with the legal system is the system itself. This is something Dual Destinies ignores while tackling the dark age of the law, which was something seemingly resolved in Apollo Justice through the new juris system. Like, you don't introduce said plot point and do nothing to help it in the end. I think it's safe to say that the legal system was broken, or at least corrupt, and in the hands of some more craftier villains, they could use it to their advantage. In this case, I'll use Darien, a man who is clearly the killer and blackmailed Machi to silence. You can't really do anything in that situation. Phoenix even states before you take him on that Apollo won't be able to take down Darien through conventional means under the current legal system. He gives Apollo the advice to ignite Darien's flame in order to make him accidentally spill more information. This is similar to what Phoenix does to Kristoff in Case 1. The point in Case 3 is to show how bad the legal system is and why it needed to be changed. Therefore, the logical failing makes sense, as it was used to show how the legal system would ignore something as simple as common sense due to a lack of evidence. And this is the thing, common sense is something Phoenix intended to bring into the legal system through the juris system. This is explicitly stated in the game, as at the end of the game, all the characters give a speech on why the legal system needed a change. Now, given that the purpose of the case is to show that the legal system lacked common sense, this logical failing isn't a bad thing, because it's exactly the game's intention. Do you know where people actually got this from? It was from the game. Like, Apollo said it. Apollo said it, and this is something I personally just don't understand. If you still don't agree with me in terms of story context, and you still believe that simple logical failings make a case, more specifically the game, bad, then you probably hate every single Ace Attorney game. Let's start with Turnabout Sisters. This case is iconic as it holds one of the most significant events in the series. But besides that, the case is pretty lackluster. Ignoring the bland characters and underwhelming ending where Mia wins the case for you, there's a pretty big logical failing similar to the one people complain about in Turnabout Serenade. This is of course the accusation of Maya murdering her sister. For starters, Maya didn't have a motive for killing Mia. In fact, in the final phone call between Maya and Mia, it's easily proven that Maya had no malicious intentions in visiting Mia. Another fact to consider is Phoenix's eyewitness account. When he entered the room, the first thing he saw was this: Maya crying her eyes out next to Mia's dead body. The grounds for accusing Maya was based off a bloody note with her name on it, which could have been written by anyone. There was no direct proof that Mia was the one who wrote it. And I want to make something clear, I still do love the first game for getting me into the series, and it will always hold a place dear in my heart as an Ace Attorney fan because of it, but I'm not going to turn a blind eye to its flaws. My problem with the community at times stems from people only caring about the writing when it's convenient to them. Turnabout Sisters is like Reunion My Turnabout. While the case itself holds significant and iconic moments from the series, when looked at from a single case perspective, they're not all that great or special. I regard Case 2 of Apollo Justice better than these two cases, as the characters are more eccentric and fun, and it introduces the perceived mechanic very nicely, and maintains a great level of mystery in who did it and why. Meanwhile, these two cases are more of a why. And I'm not trying to write off these cases either. Reunion My Turnabout is literally one of my favourite cases from the entire series. Turnabout Sisters, not so much, but I can look back and feel nostalgia. But that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore the flaws of them. Like again, here's a big one I noticed. Will Powers was accused of murder over a toy prop and a picture of a guy in a costume. Dwell on that. Will Powers was accused over a toy prop that the game acknowledges could in no way be the murder weapon, and a random photo of a guy in a costume. Like, I don't hold all these things against the first game. I still enjoy it, and I still love the first game, but you can't say the logical failing in Apollo Justice ruins the entire game and its writing, but then go around saying the first and second game are void of issues too. Case 3 is designed to be logically flawed. It's the entire point of the case, and it does this job extremely well. And it establishes that the legal system is lacking in something important: common sense. People are disliking this case for simply doing what it was designed to do, and explain this several times throughout the game. And if you still think this is unjustified, despite it being intentional, then what exactly do you think of the games with logical failings that aren't intentional, and have little rhyme or reason to be there? And I'm gonna say this before anyone decides to jump on me, for once again going back to what the first two games did. Just because we like the series doesn't mean we should ignore its flaws. It's only when we know the good and bad of a game that we can know what the game actually is. I don't critique games for fun, no one does, but we critique games because we have standards, because some things legitimately aren't acceptable. Take the Phantom. And I'm sorry if I keep going back to him, but he's a really good example for this. The Phantom is a villain with very little explained. We don't know anything. And regardless of what anyone says, that's unacceptable. I know people aren't fond of me harping on Dual Destiny, but I want you to think about it this way. Imagine for a second the Phantom wasn't in Dual Destiny. Imagine he was in Apollo Justice, and he replaced Kristoff as the main villain. Just assuming somehow in some universe he was the killer and it made sense entirely with the game's story and plot. And it was just Apollo and Clavia working to take him down. If the Phantom was in Apollo Justice and not Dual Destiny, I want you to answer this question for me. Do you honestly think that people would have been as forgiving with a villain that doesn't explain something as simple as a name, a face, and an actual reason to be doing what he's doing? I honestly don't think so, considering how it's commonly believed that Kristoff had no motive and how it's viewed as one of the game's biggest flaws. This game would have been butchered if it committed such an act. We all know that, and I know no one would pass up a chance to give this game another beatdown because of that. And I wouldn't either, because if it was in Apollo Justice, Trials and Tribulations, Investigations 2, I would still think it's the worst villain to ever be in an Ace Attorney game. Now getting back to topic, a lot of the reasons people dislike Apollo Justice just aren't true. So, Case 3 is accused of being bad for accusing a blind child of shooting without sustaining any injuries, when people are completely ignoring that that's what the case is designed to be, and the context of the entire game. The Mason system is accused of using time travel, but it's not. It's not only a simulation for the jurors, but Phoenix presents the nail polish because it's on the table, it's the only thing he wasn't allowed to examine, but also presents Kristoff because Kristoff stated in their conversation prior, Phoenix has always suspected Kristoff. There's no time travel business involved here. It's just Phoenix using common sense. And finally, Kristoff being accused of having no motive, when it's made clear several times near the end of the game that Kristoff killed in paranoia. He was afraid people would discover he forged evidence, and would eliminate everyone relating to the case, so it didn't tarnish his reputation. So now that these things have been explained, this really begs the question, why exactly are people hating Apollo Justice? This is where things get controversial. There's a big difference between opinion and fact. My opinion is that Apollo Justice is an overhated game. My facts to back this up are simple. Case 3 is designed to be the way it is. Like, that is a fact. The Mason system has logical explanations for why Phoenix presents the nail polish and Kristoff's profile. And lastly, it establishes what Kristoff's motive was in the game. These are all facts. So when I say something like, people hate Apollo Justice for silly reasons, it's not because I don't respect other people's opinions, it's the fact that a lot of the bases behind these arguments are legitimately flawed, as many of these so-called issues with the story are explained in the game. Therefore, unfortunately, the plot hole argument really doesn't stand any ground. So the question becomes to the people saying these things, out of curiosity, why don't you dislike the first game? Because that game does have flawed logic and plot holes. Why don't you dislike Dual Destiny? Because after all, the Black Cyclops don't even make sense in the series continuity. I mean, Kristoff wasn't subconsciously hiding anything. We know his motive. He knew his motive. He knew exactly what he was doing the entire time. There is no fan theory that is going to dispute that fact. So factually speaking, the explanation given for the Black Cyclops makes no sense when you actually understand the character of Kristoff Gavin and how he knew what he was doing the entire time. The series isn't void of plot holes, it never has been. So even if you don't agree with me, you're essentially saying that all the games are bad, because all of them have logical failings in them in one place or another. It's not a perfect series, and I feel like Apollo Justice is treated like the trash of the series, when other games share the flaws we're accusing Apollo Justice of. But not only are these quote-unquote problems not true, but unlike the logical failings in the other games, the one in Case 3 is actually justified through the context of the entire game, and what it was designed to accomplish. And that's something I noticed. A lot of people tend to think I overhate games in the series when I talk about their flaws and defend Apollo Justice, and sometimes I'm just thinking, what's wrong with that? Why should we just ignore the flaws of a game just because we're afraid of being viewed as haters? Let me reference a video I made, my final impressions video of Ace Attorney 6. While it was received better than I expected, I still got people saying that I was blindly bashing the game, to which I say, how? Not only did I express various things I felt like the game was doing right over Dual Destinies, but I clearly stated near the end of the video that I was indifferent to the game, meaning I don't think it's good, but I don't think it's bad either. I didn't give a solid opinion. And yes, I did say things I didn't like about the game's direction, but it's when people act like you spent the last 10 minutes bashing the game just because you expressed one negative opinion on the game. Also, for the people who didn't see that video, here's a visual representation of what happened.
What's supposed to mean?
Just means
Yo, what the deal, man? What's going on here?
Man?
I asked this kid if he was sad about Ace Attorney 6, and he said
He said,
Yeah, what's wrong with you? You're not excited?
Not excited?
Who ain't excited?
This little nigga right here.
Why ain't he excited?
Just because you say something bad about a game doesn't mean you hate the entire series. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a human being with standards, preferences, and a desire to make games better. And yes, some people do take this too far, and I understand that. However, if something is legitimately an issue, it's an issue. And I know people will bring reference to the critiques of Apollo Justice's story, but as I've already stated, the points being made aren't very valid. And that's not because I disagree with them or hate anyone who dislikes Apollo Justice, it's because the game legit explains all these things. The logical failing in case 3 of Apollo Justice, and the logical failing in case 2 and 3 of the first game, are the exact same principle. A defendant is accused of committing a crime with very little evidence because no one else could have done it. There is evidence to the possibility of the defendant committing the crime, but it's in no way strong enough to say, hey, you did it. The common sense of anybody would make someone go, hey, considering I met this girl crying on her sister's dead body, we know exactly why she came and she had no motive, maybe she didn't do it. Hey, considering we ourselves are admitting this toy prop is in no way strong enough to be used as a murder weapon, and our most definitive piece of evidence is a picture of a guy in a costume, maybe it doesn't make sense for us to be accusing Will Powers. Hey, considering at this point we're under the assumption that this child is blind, and we acknowledge the fact that if this gun is shot incorrectly, it could dislocate his shoulder, hey, maybe, just maybe he didn't do it. But what's my point here? It's the same principle. The legal system doesn't care for common sense. If you haven't got the evidence, then you're essentially screwed, and no one is going to listen to you. Welcome to the legal system in Ace Attorney. This isn't something new, it was designed to be this way. But like I said, the big difference between case 3 of Apollo Justice and other entries in the series is Apollo Justice is doing it intentionally so it can bring common sense to the legal system, and the other games don't really have much rhyme or reason for having them there. And here comes the controversy, here comes the dislikes, the hate, the anger and annoyance at what I say. But if we're gonna talk about plot holes and logical failings ruining a game, why is no one talking about how Dual Destinies completely ignores everything Apollo Justice established in terms of helping the legal system evolve? Why is no one talking about the villain with little to no substance whatsoever? That's not just silly, that's double standard. And I'm sorry if I offend you, but if you're the same person accusing Apollo Justice of being bad because of case 3, and you're completely ignoring the holes and problems with Dual Destinies, that makes you a hypocrite. And I'm not saying that to offend people, and I know I'm gonna be hated for what I say today, but is it not true? Regardless of what people think about Dual Destiny, the fandom having no name, origin, or information given, that is a fact. Christoph just plain having no motive, that's not true. The Black Cyclops making no sense when you look at how they were used in Apollo Justice, that's a fact. Because Christoph knew exactly what he was doing the entire time, and why he did what he did. There was nothing subconscious about his actions. The Mason system having time travel issues, that's not true. So now that I've found a hole in Dual Destiny's writing, am I going to bash and hate it? Like a majority of the Ace Attorney community has been doing to Apollo Justice for years now. And you know what? No. Because while that is an issue, that's a really petty reason to hate an entire game. Because simply saying something wrong with a game doesn't mean you're bashing it. Critiquing a game doesn't make you the worst person in the world, as long as what you're saying is actually true. Things genuinely aren't explained. If things legitimately have no rhyme or reason to be there. If we're doing it out of love for the series as a whole. I found several holes and problems with the first game, from Will Powers' to the basis of Maya's accusation, to the fact that Mia stole the victory from you by literally winning the case for you, which is funny because that's what people are accusing Phoenix of doing in Apollo Justice when he's literally only a co-counsel for one case, or how Manfred von Karma's entire motive was getting a penalty, and people want to lie about Christoph killing over a poker game and it being an issue, or how Justice for All holds 3 of honestly the most obvious cases in the entire series. The only eyewitness, the only woman with a sprite who wasn't in our visible sight, even though there was a pretty cool twist at the end. And to Acro, obviously being the only one who could have done it. But some people want to hate Apollo Justice because Darian was obviously the killer, when the entire point was to show that the legal system was corrupt and lacked common sense. How about Furio Tigre obviously being the killer? Because he was obviously the person impersonating Phoenix in case 3, but no one's really complaining about logic there. Like, the judge even admits, yeah, I'm certain it was you, but that's not evident. That's the legal system, guys. And would you look at that, I've named a flaw in pretty much every main series Ace Attorney game. But do I hate them? No. No, 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 I do not hate these games. I like the first game. I like Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations is one of my favourite games in the series. But I pointed these flaws out for a reason. I wanted to show people that the series isn't perfect and we just really need to stop with the double standard in general. You can't be the same people lying about Apollo Justice for plot holes it doesn't have, but then ignore the flaws of the games with the problems that they do have. And this is one of the big topics I wanted to discuss. The double standard, the illegitimate hate for the story, and us as a community being able to accept the genuine flaws of all the games, not just one. Hell, like, even Apollo Justice isn't perfect. It doesn't change up the gameplay in any way as opposed to investigation, which sort of sucks considering this was supposed to be their big jump into the DS. Apollo Justice does have some annoying characters, and while this next one is in no way the game's fault, the sequel doesn't follow up on it in any way, so to a lot of fans, it ends up being looked at as minor, and just not that important. Because when you think about it, all three of those big things Apollo Justice focused on which mean nothing in Dual Destiny. Phoenix gets his badge back, Brucey is thrown into obscurity, and most importantly, the legal system remains the exact same. And the game acts like the previous game didn't establish that as an issue. In a way, Dual Destiny is almost completely defeats the purpose of playing Apollo Justice, because all the key things established are either completely ignored or brushed aside for something old or something new, meaning Apollo Justice, as a game, barely has any significance anymore, because a lot of the things the game did were overwritten in Dual Destinies. What exactly is my point here? It's simple, the games aren't perfect and they never will be. We all have our own preferences and biases that make us who we are. That's understandable, but we shouldn't let those preferences blind us from what's true and what's not. But what do you think? Have I convinced you that all the games have flaws, that the plot holes that we accuse Apollo Justice of aren't true, or that we shouldn't take offense to the critiques being given to the games? Leave a comment below stating what you think. I'm curious. I'm gonna discuss the characters another day, because it's a very long thing to explain. In this entire 50-page review, I'd honestly say the characters took up like 30 pages, so I might just end up making individual videos dedicated to the characters. You know, something like the Godot video I made. Like, would you guys be interested in that? Tell me in the comments below, or just insult me, either or really. Again, I'm not trying to make people think like me, I'm just trying to make people think, like, in general. With that said, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. I'm the Storyteller and I'll see you around.
The American press struggles to comprehend the incident. To them, Huey is like a calf that refuses its mother's udder, choosing instead to drink the bitter waters of its own making. Here is the danger of too much hope. Skeptics are treated like blasphemers, and indifference becomes equal to hate.